This is The Storied Outdoors, a podcast somewhere between Lewis and Tolkien and Lewis and Clark, finding clarity in the stories we tell and the adventures that shape us. Welcome to The Storied Outdoors. My name is Brad Hill, and I'm joined as always by my good friend and co-host Brian Gill. We're joined today by Chris Hanson, the founder of 3G Engagement, a digital marketing company. He's a bourbon connoisseur. If you're watching on YouTube, that's obviously clear. He's a sled dog racer and a fly fisherman extraordinaire. Chris grew up spending much of his time in northern Minnesota. He moved all over, living in several places, he said, that didn't have electricity or even running water. He quit school in the 8th grade and pursued a life in the woods, he says. During that time, he fell in love with the world of training and racing sled dogs. I live in Mobile, Alabama. That sounds fascinating because we've seen snow like twice in my life. So racing sled dogs is so far from my imagination that it couldn't be further, but that sounds incredible. But it took you on a long 1-year journey of racing all over the Midwest, Canada, and Alaska. So that's, how cool is that? But you traveled a long road with many twists and turns through college, car sales, internet manager of a dealership, and eventually an e-commerce director and digital strategist. So a significant part of your story, though, Chris, and one I'm excited to talk about, is highlighted in a short film called The Day I Disremembered. This film outlines a very scary but redemptive chapter in your story about and how fly fishing has played an integral role in your recovery. So, man, thanks for taking time to join us, and we look forward. There's so much that we can talk about. We're going to try to cram a lot into this conversation today.
Thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to be on the podcast and for those watching on video. And I really appreciate you inviting me and taking the time to chat.
Chris, thanks again for joining us. And man, I recently watched the video again today. The Day I Disremembered. I want to talk about that. And just for those who may not be familiar with this is this film. We're going to have a link to this film in our show notes. And but man, this has been part of I don't know how many film festivals. I don't know how many you were invited to so many of these things and won some awards along the way. It's a beautiful film. Mm-hmm. It has some amazing footage of catching trout and fishing. It's a story that talks about your life. It talks about your background and your growing up and all this. But The Day I Disremembered, that, oh my goodness, man! Tell us about that. Like, tell us about that day and what that was like.
It's not a common term for starters either. That was what caught my eyes. Like, that's an interesting way to say that. And so as you unfolded, it was really cool. I was like, oh no, this makes total sense. So yeah, share disremembering. What is that like?
Yeah, so that'll be a combination of what my wife told me. Well, I'll start with what I remember, and then all the pieces that my wife Bobby Joe told me, and then kind of when I was back, so to speak. So we had gone on a vacation. It was just the two of us. Went on a cruise. After the cruise, which was out of Miami, we're like, let's stay a couple of days in Miami, see the town, go out to eat, enjoy some Cuban food, and so we were at a Marriott right on the ocean, and we were packing up to leave, and I went out on the balcony and I looked out. It's so I'll get this part out of the way because it's kind of funny every time I tell this story. It's I think about, it always has to come out and then I'm good. I think about like kind of some of how it made me feel after. but I also think about Bobby Joe during it, because it was scary for her. So anyways, I went out on the balcony. I'm looking. It's this awesome balcony. I'm looking out at the ocean, and I said, "We should have spent more time out here. This is amazing." And Bobby Joe said, "What are you talking about? We've been out there for dinner. We were out there this morning and had breakfast." And I guess I should fill in a piece of what happened right before that. As we were packing, there was a shirt. I think if I remember that right, there was a shirt where I was like, hey, where did this come from? And she's like, well, what do you mean? And it, like, she thought it, but it didn't really register. It was like weird comment. Then when I went out on a balcony and I said that, and she said, she's like, we've been out there for dinner, for breakfast. And then I said, I don't want to scare you, but I don't remember any of that.
Wow.
So at that point, she thought I was having a stroke. She started asking me other questions. And I knew our kids. I knew lots of details in the past, but I didn't remember this gap in time. Let's say, I think it was 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I didn't remember the cruise at all. And so in this questioning, she thought I was having a stroke, and so she wanted to rush me to the hospital. And it's funny, something I didn't mention in the film, but I joke about with friends, and this is true. So she's asking me all these questions, and I'm pretty emotionless, but confused. And then she said, do you remember that we're going to a UFC event when we get back? It's in Denver. And I looked at her all shocked, and I started crying because I didn't remember that, which I think obviously it had to do more than like, a UFC event. It was the fact that, I booked the event. We're going to it. When we get back, we're going to it. And I don't remember any of that. And so I think as much as we joke about it, it wasn't until, asking me questions about family and all this stuff, but it was the UFC event that made me tear up. When the reality is it was probably at that point, it was dawning on me that something bad was happening.
Yeah, this is bigger than just a short-term thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So so she rushed me to the hospital, and so at this point, I feel like I remember going to the lobby, but I'm not really sure about that. I don't remember getting to the hospital. So, from kind of this point on, I don't remember any of it. So we get to the hospital, and basically what they start doing is they start eliminating things. So the first thing is to check, about a stroke. So MRIs, testing, like all this stuff. And what's interesting is transient global amnesia. And just to be clear, it has nothing to do with, like, we're on a cruise traveling. Transient doesn't have anything to do with, you don't have to be gone anywhere for this to happen. So to diagnose it, it's a process of elimination to go, it's not a stroke, it's not this, it's not that. And then they come to the conclusion, that this is what it is. So after getting all the serious things out of the way, they tell her, so this is what we think it is. And if I remember right, I mean, they've seen like, I don't know, 2, 3 cases, at the hospital over time. It's extremely rare. And so then we're in the hospital like 8 hours or around 8 hours. So to tell you how crazy this is, so I'm kind of very particular about a lot, maybe OCD a little bit about a lot of different things, like where my phone is, where my computer, my wallet, all these different things. And so if you can imagine, like once she knew it wasn't serious, what would happen is I would say, where's my wallet? It's not in my pocket. She's like, I got it right here, honey. Oh, okay. And then 5 minutes later, where's my wallet? I'm asking her the same questions, and she's saying, do you know why we're here? No, I don't. What happened was we were on a cruise. Do you remember that? No, I don't. Okay, we're here. They said you have transient global amnesia. Oh, wow. So what is that? She'd tell me, and 5 minutes later, my memory's reset, and I don't remember anything that she's told me.
Wow.
So yeah, so this is like going on, for hours. And then the point that I do remember is a doctor coming in and saying, Chris, do you know who I am? And I said, yes. Do you know why you're here? Yes. And I tell him. And then he asks me that, like, 5 minutes later, it's kind of this conversation. And I'm like, yeah, you just told me. And so it was at that point, because he had come in multiple times, obviously, throughout this whole, thing. And then that's when my not my memory, but my present self of being able to remember things. I don't remember everything leading up to it. I do remember my past. And then a bunch of doctors, like, it was kind of funny because it felt like like a exotic animal in the zoo, probably. There's like 7 or 8 of them. They come in and they're like, do you remember us? No. Oh, and they're asking me questions, and they're like, they got clipboards and they're writing notes, and they're like, man, this is the real deal. This guy had transient global amnesia. He's in our hospital, and we've been able to talk to him through this whole process, and now he's fine. And so then at that point, the doctor said, do you they don't know what causes it, but there are some common threads. And so he said, do you get migraines? And I said, yes. It's a form of a migraine in a way of how it affects your brain. And he said, do you have stress in your life? And I said, yeah, I have stress in my life. I mean, besides company and employees, I've always been very driven, and goals, and stress, at least for me, has been a part of my life for a long time. And he said, you're going to have to figure out how to manage that. It's extremely rare for someone to get it again. But it's not possible. People have, but he said, more importantly, it's not, that's really, what kind of brought you to this place. And so he said, you're gonna have to get this figured out when you get home. Because he also asked me, do you take, regular time off? And I'm like, well, we're on vacation now, but at home, no, I work long hours, and so kind of a combination of the migraines and working a lot and stress. He said, you're going to have to focus on figuring out how to better manage that.
Wow. So would you name it one more time? A transient global amnesia?
Amnesia. Yep. Transient global amnesia.
Now, since this happened, like, are Are you a part of any like communication or studies going forward? Are there more cases of this? Have we seen, more of this, or is it still considered very rare?
There's definitely been cases, and it's kind of funny because when I did research when I got home, there's I think, for lack of a better name, but maybe that's what they even call them, there's support groups for it, and there's people that um, it definitely, obviously, I mean, I'm telling the story and this is years later, so it brings up some emotion. Part of that is, my personality as well. Um, uh, but then part of it is it's a weird thing to go through. But I came across some of those. I'm not a part of it. I don't, me personally, I don't feel like I need to be, but I mean, it's awesome, whatever they're doing, and people have told their stories. And, Bobby Joe was certainly nervous when we got back, because she's like, what happens if you're traveling and this happens and you don't know where you are? Which I had a business trip. I think it was the next week. She didn't want me to go on it because she was worried about that. And then as far as studies, no, I think they've done extensive studies, or they have, and they really don't know what causes it. There's only those common threads of, talking to people that have gone through it, where, percentage wise, and I don't even know what percentage it is, that have migraines or stress or these different things.
Well, did you ever get any of that time back since then?
Oh, that's a great question. No, it's still gone. Which the doctor said, there's a good possibility that you'll gain.
Hmm. That's a long one.
So, yeah, are you there?
Yeah, we lost you there for a second, Chris.
Sorry. Yeah, so it was weird when I got back. And I think the biggest thing, which I, describe it in the movie, and it fits it to a T. The thing that bothered me the most was, the best way to explain it is, if you ever watch a movie and there's a certain actor and you're like, oh, who is that? What's his name? Or what movie was he in? I know who that is. And you're trying to think about it. And then today's so easy because you can just Google it and go, oh, that's what he was in. And then you don't think about it, right? You're just like, oh, and you move on.
Mm-hmm.
But, at least for me, it's like, I got to know who it was. Or like you meet somebody, it's the same thing. Or you see somebody and it's the same thing. You're like, oh, shoot, what's his name? And it bothers you till you know.
Oh, yeah.
And then you're relieved after you remember it.
Yeah.
So when I got back, I had that nagging feeling of trying to remember my last, 8 hour plus, with this nagging feeling that I couldn't remember it, but trying to remember it, which really bothered me. And then I also, for a few weeks, would wake up in the middle of the night, or even when I woke up in the morning, and not even trying, I just instantly started thinking about last night. What did we do? What did we eat? And kind of like covering that last piece, as if I just had to go, okay, yeah, no issues. I remember. And
yeah, kind of like you were like just making sure it wasn't happening again or something.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, man, it's incredible what we one of our past seasons with a past guest, Joe Monahan from Angler's Coffee, and I had been chatting on Instagram. I had won one of the giveaways, which was awesome. So got some cool stuff from a giveaway from Angler's Coffee, and he and I were messaging back and forth, and then we had him on the show to talk about Angler's Coffee and some of his story. And so he was one of the people that connected me, that shared your profile on Instagram with me, and was like, man, you guys would really, I think you would really like Chris and his story. And because he had listened to the podcast and checked out, what we were trying to do. And so it was through Angler's Coffee that I had found out about your story in the short film. Went and watched the film immediately and loved it. Of course, it's gorgeous. One of the things that's the beauty of fly fishing is make some of those films, any of those films, so much fun to watch because it is beautiful. The sport, the places that you find yourself are beautiful. Can you talk a little bit about, like, that was sort of not the impetus of the film, but like that fly fishing plays a huge role in your recovery, in your finding, your doctor's like, you need to work out your schedule. You need to find some time to rest. Right. And so what can you talk about what fly fishing did and how that played a major role in your recovery?
Yeah. So when we got back to Colorado, even after going through what I went through, and also the fact that it was bothering me, I didn't change anything. I just didn't take long, and I was just, back to working, back to, working evenings, weekends, and it's not uncommon for me to work, or I should say, wasn't uncommon for me to work, till late evening, to, get up at 4 because I couldn't sleep, and go, well, might as well get some work done. And so when I got back, I didn't change anything. And Bobby Joe was, worried, obviously. And she's like, you can't keep doing this. Remember what the doctor said. And we had talked about fly fishing because we were in Colorado. I grew up fishing, conventional lures and bait, and enjoyed it, but it wasn't, there were certain parts of my life where, I fished more times throughout the summer than others. I've been ice fishing and enjoy.
Say you could probably ice fish up there where you grew up.
Yeah, right? Yeah, absolutely. But probably what sums it up is like, or how much I enjoyed it would be my brother-in-law. He's like really into it. If we went camping for a week, he'd fish every day. I'd fish 2 or 3 times with him, and he'd be like, hey, I'm going to get up in the morning. Want to go? And I'm like, no, I'm going to hang back and do some other stuff. So I really enjoyed it, but that's not all I wanted to do. So we talked about fly fishing. It looked like, super interesting to me. I hadn't been fishing, even conventional fishing, for a long time, for quite a while. Actually, when we go back to Minnesota in the spring, sturgeon fishing with my brother-in-law. So
cool.
Yeah. And so, remember that. So anyways, my wife booked a guided trip for me at Angler's Covey in town. And she was going to go with, and then her dad ended up being not feeling well, so she stayed back with him. And so I went by myself, and I make comparisons of the first time I went out with sled dogs, where I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And so that first day fly fishing, not like what I'm going to do as a living, But I knew the first time I went out, as that day progressed, I was like fascinated about every detail. It was so amazing, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna fly fish. And I think I bought a fly rod and reel the next day or 2 days later. And so it really had a profound effect on me that first day. But more importantly, it was the only thing that could get me to leave work behind. And it was also a process because most of the places I fish in Colorado, there's no cell reception, or there's only like so some have none. Other places have like in a certain place. And so it took me a while to kind of get over that, where I'm like, okay, any client email or anything, and it's the weekend, like I can't, I can't check my email. And so it was the only thing that could, really get me away and fishing, or away from work, and just not have a cell phone and just be out, fly fishing, quiet.
Yeah, man.
You've
That's
caught some
awesome.
amazing trout, man. Your
No
Instagram
doubt.
page is solid. I mean, good night. I've never in my life seen some of the as big a fish as you've caught. It seems like that love at first sight with you for fly fishing.
Yeah, thanks. It is. I mean, I'm for good and bad. I'm pretty obsessive about. I'm all in or I'm nothing, and so it's good and bad. It's served me well, but it's how I approach everything, and work, fly fishing. It's how it affected me. And so like I love the technical aspect, all the details, which is very overwhelming, at first, until you really start to learn them. I'm in digital marketing, which it's a lot of details. It's a lot of learning, and it's ever changing. And once I got into fly fishing, it was I'm going to learn how to do well with this, and learn the different aspects and details of it.
Mm.
And so I kind of I mean, I'm still learning today, uh, learning so much, and by no means am I like have it figured out, but certainly was able to progress and really learn, and I don't know about master, but really start to be proficient at it and doing well. So
Yeah, well, you certainly caught some incredible fish. So I'm gonna say you might not be a master, but you sure got your toe in that water.
That's so true.
yeah.
You talk about learning, Chris. How has your perspective on Sabbath and rest changed now that you've gone through this amnesia event?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I think something I've always struggled with, and have learned to become so much better with it. Um, an example would even be, in the evening when we, as a family, have devotions. Bobby Joe's parents are visiting right now, for a few months, and with them, where in the past my phone would always be with me, and I would, if it buzzed, it's not like I would, like get in. I'd have to see, oh, it's not important. Okay, yeah, no, I don't need to, to deal with this. Where now it's always on me except for those times, and then it's in my home office, sitting on the desk, and I've just like learned to go, one, it's certainly not anywhere near important um to have everywhere, much less, taking the time to, really to give God the attention, and focus, and others that you're fellowshipping with, to be able to go, this is the most important thing. And I think that would apply, really to my walk, as a whole. And I've like many Christians, have gone through, those peaks and valleys, and uh, with my walk, and when certain things like this happen in your life, you definitely it it gives you a little clarity and reality check of what you think is important and what you're driving so hard to do and accomplish. And it gives you a little reality check on, is that how you want to keep, living your life with those, what you think is the most important, in your life.
Had you not had this sort of rare and unique response physically, would you have that? Do you think you would have had that perspective, or do you think it took something like that to sort of get your attention, maybe?
I definitely think the Lord definitely used it for sure. I mean, I can look at, everything in my background and go, if I could change anything, would I? I mean, I always say no, but some decisions I made, obviously, I'm not, proud of, and wish I could change. But change anything in my life that's happened, I would say no, because all of those things led me up to who I am today. The wife that I have, our kids. I think the only thing I would change is, if I having a relationship with my biological mom. But other than that, I wouldn't change anything. So I think this experience, fits into the same thing, which is, the Lord definitely, used it, and it's something that I, needed, probably, yeah.
What's
Yeah, go ahead.
what's been your, as you reflect on? I mean, the film is what I like. What I like about it, it is sort of it's a telling of the story. But it's also a reflection on the experience, like what we're doing here. Like what we're doing here. What's Since the film has come out, and you've been having some of these conversations, and you've gone to the shows. What's been some of your, further reflections on this experience as that believer? What's been something you've learned or you've been taught, you think, through this process?
Um, I think, some of, what I mentioned, which is, especially for me, or people, like me, where I'm an all or nothing, kind of person, and, looking at, what we're spending our time with, and what we're, um, are we, are we are we so passionate and driven towards certain things, which is fine, but are we that way? Am I that way with, with my walk, with the Lord, with other, with the body, with, other brothers, and I'm, that's still a work in progress for me. I'm very, I don't know if loner is the right. I'm an extreme extrovert introvert person, so I've spent many of my years in sales, and even my company now, working with clients, and I really enjoy it, and I can, you know, it's great, but it's also draining as well, you know. And I've spoke at many events all over the country, and it took me, you know, many years later to realize, as much as I loved it and put all the time into it, and it went well, it really took a lot out of me because of that introvert extrovert. And so, you know, kind of long story into, you know, what you just asked, which is, you know, so, you know, for me, I mean, I'm content to go fishing by myself. I'm content to not, you know, get together with other people, fellowship with other brothers, and so that's been a work in progress, and something that, you know, has helped with that experience of, you know, what am I, you know, what am I putting my time and focus and importance, and, you know, putting the same energy, and even if it's something that takes more energy to do and isn't exactly what I want to do, that spending time with other, you know, brothers in the body is, even if it's not my thing where I like to just, you know, talk with all these people and get together, just because it's not what I would choose or my focus. I do that with business and with speaking at things, you know, so, you know, I need to put the same time and energy into the other.
It's almost like Christian community is a spiritual discipline in itself. You know, you have to be intentional about making that time, even if you don't feel like it, and even if it's not something that you want to do initially. It's something that's beneficial, is to be in fellowship with others and in that community. And
yes,
so if you have, you know, we have a lot of listeners who are very driven, just like yourself. To those who are listening now, what would you tell them about maybe work-life balance?
One, I would say, I don't know. I don't know if work-life balance, it's hard for me to define what that is.
Exactly. That's a hard term. Yeah. What does that look like?
Or does it exist?
Sure. That's fair.
I think there's some confusion, you know, with even younger people, you know, with work. But the real answer is, you have to have some type of balance, you know. And so what that could mean is, before I got into fly fishing, you know, I'm a big UFC fan, so I watch, you know, most of the events, and that's and I like grilling, barbecue, smoking, with the smoker, and so I have some things that I enjoy doing, but they're at my home, you know, and so that gives, you know, some balance, but it's still at my home. And so, you know, having something like fly fishing that gets me out and doing something by myself, maybe with somebody, you know, you're outside, you know, in the quiet, and you have time to, you know, think about nothing, or think about things that you haven't had time to think about. And so, you know, work life balance, you know, you need something that that can do that, you know, for you. And then if you put time to it and stay with it, it's, you know, for me, it's changed everything, you know, to the point of, you know, Bobby Joe will say, this is pretty common. She'll go, you know, you didn't go fishing last week. You really should, you should go you should go out this weekend, or you should take a day. And what she's really saying is, you seem tense and stressed. You should go out fishing.
You need to go. You need to get out.
That's a really kind way of saying, yeah, I
Yeah.
think you need some alone time.
Yeah. So I don't ever hear from her, you're going again. I mean, I never hear that from her.
Wow, that's great.
Well, what's I tell you what, this is not our little queue of questions, but what's next on the smoker? Because every time I open up my Instagram, I see you opening that smoker to something that looks scrumptious.
Oh my gosh, you're my favorite account to follow. I mean, and let me tell you, I've got a sticker that you made. It's the barbecue bourbon and fly fishing sticker.
Oh yeah,
that's my favorite sticker, hands down.
Solid, it's solid.
Yeah, it's funny because that's another thing that it's the same thing. I didn't grow up cooking. I had no interest in it. Bobby Joe's a phenomenal cook. And even like grilling, wasn't great at it. And then I don't know if I had, I don't even know what it was, but I think probably, it was probably watching one of those shows, those cooking, barbecue TV shows. And I was kind of fascinated about the details and, I mean, smoking a brisket or something, like some stuff's way easier than others. And then some of it, I mean, you can follow, cooking in general, you can follow the recipe and it doesn't mean it's going to turn out. And so it was fascinating to me. And so I got into it the same way I do other things, which is, just like, I'm going to, learn how to do this. And I really enjoy it. And I like the process of it, the details. And so what's really helped is the last couple years, 3 years, we've gotten a half a cow from a local
Nice.
farmer. And so I give them a list of the cuts that I want. So obviously all the normal stuff for, the cooking in the kitchen, and then all the like beef ribs and brisket and things that I want to put on the smoker and the grill. And so besides it being way better for you, it's fun having that. So
yeah,
I'm always, freezer's full. I just go grab when I, want to put something on.
Man, I attempted my first brisket this year. It was kind of scary because it's such like an investment.
Yeah.
And like, man, I don't want to ruin this piece of meat, but it turned out phenomenal. It was awesome. Great. And like you said, it's so much fun, like the whole process of, trimming the fat and getting the rub and all, wrapping it and all the little things, the little details. It was a lot of fun. I see why people really, really get into it, headlong into it.
Yeah,
and, totally. I certainly see how they get into it after I slice that thing open because it was delicious.
Yeah,
that's incredible. One of the things I'm just looking at your sort of the bio, and I can't imagine like how hard it would be to choose a story, but we have a little section of our podcast that we want to hear a good story around the campfire. So we'll call this sort of a digital campfire, is this podcast. And so what's your sort of go-to campfire story that you have from, maybe your childhood, sled dogging? I mean, some kind of fun, anything fun or, scary. I mean, our favorites usually involve bear stories. So if you got a bear story, we're always up for a bear story.
Always like a good bear story.
We've had a couple of those on the podcast that are always fun to hear, but just, maybe some.
Yeah, you had mentioned it, early in the intro. I trained and raced sled dogs for 12 years. And so it's why I always kind of liken fly fishing to that, because the first time I went out, I was actually learning I grew up a city kid, then moved to northern Minnesota, and learning how to trap. So there was this guy, and he that I met, and he was trapping beaver, and he saved the carcasses for this woman who had sled dogs. And because high fat, really good. I mean, it's great for sled dogs. High protein and fat, and so I called her up, and I asked him. I said, could I go see the dogs? Do you think would she let me? And he's like, oh yeah, call her up. So I called her up and asked if I could come and see the dogs, and she said, I'm actually going on a training run. If you want to come with, and I'm like, oh okay. So I went over there. She had like 100 dogs, and hooking up the team, and they're just jumping up and down, screaming to go. I mean, they love pulling a sled. They live for it, like a lab fetches a stick. And I got in the sled, and we took off, and it was, I don't know how long we were gone, 30 minutes, and maybe it was like an hour. I think it was like, oh yeah, it was around an hour, because it was a 30-mile run. And the whole time I'm in the sled, I'm like, I'm going to do this. I don't know how. I have no money, but I'm going to get into this. And so, yeah, 12 years did that. And not the campfire story, but kind of what led up to it. And so that took me, to different parts of the country, including living in Alaska. And I think probably the two stories, which would be northern Minnesota, running a team, on a about an hour and a half, run up on the North Shore in Grand Marais, and the snow, like it's super deep on the sides, packed in the middle, and a moose came out on the trail. And if you've ever heard stories of them, in fact, one year in Alaska, they had moose that were dying on the railroad tracks because it was such a deep snow year that they get on these packed, railroad track, and they don't want to leave. So if you meet them on a trail and they're trudging through that deep snow, and then they get on this packed trail, even though their feet kind of go in a little bit, they don't want to leave the trail.
It seems like they would have the right of way.
You're right. Yes. Yeah.
Hey, put in perspective how big a moose is.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, like, how big is a moose?
Yeah. What's the comparison to a horse? Like a big, like one of the big,
like a Clydesdale, or
like the Clydesdale, like something like that. It seems like it to me. Yeah.
Gosh, there's a viral video I remember seeing of there was a moose walking on this divided highway. It was at night, and he's walking, and so he's already kind of lifted up because there's a grass thing in the divided highway. It's got him a little bit higher, so it made him look extra tall. But this guy is like backing up in a Ford Explorer, and the moose dwarfs the Ford Explorer.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's scale. I've never seen that scale before, but I know what kind of car that is. And that moose looks much larger than that vehicle. One, he's lifted up a good 2 additional feet because of the grass kind of hump in the middle of the road. But his horns are like wider than the vehicle. And it looked enormous. So a moose is walking in the snow on the trail because the snow is packed down. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. They're trudging through the deep snow, and then they get on this trail, and then they start walking on the trail, and they're like, this is awesome.
This is the path of least resistance.
Yeah, exactly. So, there's been many a moose team, many a sled dog team that's been trampled by moose, both on races, on the Iditarod, training, and the problem is, like, they don't want to leave. And the dogs, when they see a moose, I mean, they get excited. Now, I've heard stories of the dogs when the moose is there and trampling, and it's scary. And in the moment, the dogs definitely know, the grim situation they're in. But when they see a moose, like, to give perspective on how strong dogs are, you can hook 10 dogs up to a car, and they'll pull that down a road. Wow. So you take those same 10 dogs and you hook them up to a 50-pound sled, and they see a moose or any animal. So fortunately for me, they saw the moose, and they started like, running hard and pulling, and I'm braking, and the moose was there, and fortunately he didn't want anything to do with the team that was coming at him, and I was trying to slow down as much as possible. And then he ran off into the woods. And sled dogs are funny because a well trained team, they'll run right by where the moose was. Not trained well, they'll run in and try to follow.
Squirrel.
They run right by him, and they're still excited, and they're running, and they're all amped up about it, but they're just still going down the trail, even though you passed them.
Wow.
So yeah, I think that probably.
I bet you were puckered up.
Oh yeah, it was like heart is just pounding, and
tighter than a snare drum.
Right. Yeah.
Man,
I saw the other thing is when I was in Alaska, I lived in a tundra open area, and south of Nome, so way up north, in a small village that was windy tundra, no trees around. And so I'm on a training run, and running across the tundra, and I'm following the guy that I'm working for, and then this whiteout came. And so unlike when you're in the woods, you're on a trail, and the snow's deep, like their dogs aren't just going to go off into the deep snow, you're on the trail. On the tundra, you're on a trail, but it's very difficult because it's so windblown to tell if you're off the trail. And so this whiteout came, and I couldn't see him in front of me. I could see my lead dogs, ahead, and then pretty soon I couldn't see them, and everything was kind of creeping in. And then I could only see the dogs in front of me. And in races, like the Iditarod and other races, there's been people that have, that's happened to. They stop their team and they try to find the trail, and they turn around and they can't find their team. And so I had heard about that. Yeah, exactly. Because now all of a sudden you put your dogs at risk, which they can manage, surviving the cold and stuff, but they need people to, bring them home. So the risk, for you surviving is even worse. So I knew not to do that. So, but I did stop because I couldn't tell if we were on the trail, and, leaders normally are good about it, but depending on how bad it is, they can get off. And so, I stayed with them and walked up, to the front, and just kept my hands on the dogs. And then I was kind of, holding them and kind of walking. And then I could tell where we had gotten off. And I'm like, okay, this is the trail over here. And just kind of pulled them to the side, got back on the sled. I think, they then, kind of smelled and go, okay, here's the trail, and we're running along. And then slowly it started coming back up, and I could see, but in the moment it was definitely scary. Couldn't see, and not sure how long it would last. So,
man, I read Undaunted Courage.
Yeah, me too. What a great book.
And it talks about how they, the Indian guides brought Lewis and Clark back after this storm, this snow. I guess it's winter. I guess. I mean, it's just like this. The whole winter accumulation of this trail was 12 feet under snow, and so, but these guides knew where to go because they'd been there before, and it's just like that's a whole world that I don't understand. And for it to be on a sled dog. And it's just like there's no trail and you don't know where to go. I mean, it's just that's a whole new level of that's a new fear unlocked.
Yeah.
A new fear unlocked. What a great book, though. If those of you listening have never read that, man, take some time to read that Undaunted Courage. I enjoyed that so much. Thanks to Ben, our pal Ben, turned me on to that one.
That's it.
That's good.
Chris,
Hey, I was
thanks for sharing
curious.
those.
I was curious about what's been some of the feedback from the film, some of the stories of, have you gotten any interactions because of the film and because of the story?
Yeah, really interesting. I'm always interested in someone's reaction, which obviously there's no right and wrong reaction, but there's definitely people that, like, oh, I enjoyed it. I love the scenery. Oh, yeah, it was a neat film. And then other people that, very fascinated by the details beyond the fly fishing, and then other people that, like, on Instagram, I know who they are, I've never met them, and have shared extremely personal stories that can relate in the same way. And I think generally speaking, men, I mean, we're supposed to be, tough and can put up with, the stuff, and we don't, talk to other people about, you know, um, problems that we're having. We just kind of, keep it in, and to hear people tell me their story, that, like, range from, like, tragic stuff to, the same, kind of details, like, what I shared. And so I've, uh, very touched by people that felt comfortable enough to tell their story. And it's funny because when I made this film, the film was going to be about the day I disremembered and how I got into fly fishing. That's what it was about. And then as I'm writing it, I started feeling, kind of going back and started putting these other details together that I wasn't going to do, and then started questioning, should I do it? And Rob Herman, who did the most of the video, my brother Jacob did the interview part, Rob did all the river scenery, and then Tim in Canada, he did the editing, which everybody did a phenomenal part that made it what it is. But anyways, Rob kept asking me for a shot list, and I said, yeah, I need to get that together for you, and I didn't, because I was kind of going through this process of writing it, and all of a sudden now I'm going to talk about all these other things, and then should I talk about them? And I don't know if people want to hear, all of these personal things. And so Rob he didn't have a shot list because I didn't tell him what the film was, except about the day I disremembered. So surprisingly, like, what he put together, he didn't know what the finished script was. And so I'm glad that I did talk about what I did, because I think it connected with a lot of people. And so that's the feedback that I've had. And funny thing is my film it was in one fly fishing film festival, only because the people that ran the Springs one that show the normal films wanted to include mine. Otherwise, all the film festivals it was selected in and won awards in which I think is actually really cool. As much as at the time I was kind of, ruffled a little bit that it didn't get accepted into a couple of the fly fishing ones. These were other ones around the country that were film festivals. They weren't outdoor film festivals. They were just your everyday film festival that it was selected in, and even
That's
won
cool.
some awards, and so it exposed people that don't know about fly fishing and a lot of other things, and got to see that. And I got a lot of questions. I went to one, and they did a Q&A at the end, and they're like, man, so you handling the fish and letting them go, it was the way you're doing that, is that just for the film? And I'm like, no, that's catch and release, and that's you there's an interesting connection with trout, and you want to be careful with them and let them back, and people were really fascinated by that as well.
That's cool.
Dude, that is so cool. I'm so glad that you shared the other aspects, because I felt like that made it your story can connect with so many other stories, and I think that's what we all can remember is sometimes God gives us a story just so that we can help somebody else through what they're going through. Mm-hmm. Really quick, Chris, one last question we like to ask is, what's your next adventure? You have anything on the horizon that you're really excited about?
Well, so I have been doing hosted trips to Alaska. And then I've wanted to go to Argentina. And so this past February, I have my buddy Drew, which is funny because I met him through Instagram. He went on my Alaska trip, and then he's been on every trip that I put together in Alaska. And so we've become close friends. And I said, hey, Drew, I want to do a hosted trip in Argentina, but I want to go check out this lodge first before I bring it.
You gotta know where you're going first. So
yeah,
it's a whole nother trip. It just got to test it all out, make sure it's okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So we went, and
it's got a rough life. Rough.
Amazing country. The food is phenomenal. The people, and so I haven't even announced it, but I'm putting together. I'm going to put together a trip every year to Argentina.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Man,
yeah,
what a beautiful place. I went down there. I was a college student with University Missions, and I got to travel to Buenos Aires.
Oh yeah,
and one of the finest steaks that I've ever had, and I had in Argentina.
Yes,
and then interestingly, the best German strudel that I've ever had.
Oh, really?
In Argentina, yeah. And one of the reasons is because after World War II, Argentina was one of the few places with their borders remained open. So a lot of Germans actually immigrated to Argentina post World War II.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
But yeah, it was a really delicious strudel and a very memorable steak. That was 20 years ago, and I remember that steak, my friend. So
the steak is amazing. Yeah, definitely.
But I would love, seeing some of your photos from that trip, man, it looked incredible. So fishing down there, that's awesome. Well, Chris, we have enjoyed this conversation, and one, it's been sort of a long time coming. I've messaged you about it, and we've gone back and forth, and finally our schedules lined up, and it was a good time for us to get together to hear you share more about this, this film and the things that you do with fly fishing. Man, it's been cool. It is cool to follow your story on, on social media, and I love to hear that, you got this guy that you never knew until social media, and now you guys are hanging out. So there's some redeeming qualities of the old social media. It's not always bad, right? There's some good to it. And one of the good things is we got to connect with you, man, and to get to know you, and for you to share your story and join us for this conversation. And we're really thankful for it, because this exposes people to your story. And like Brian said earlier, we'll have the link for your film on the show notes for this show. And we know there are a lot of guys and gals that are fly fishermen here in Alabama that follow this podcast, and we're excited to share this conversation with them, and for them to see your story and perhaps respond to it and realize maybe we need to slow down better. Maybe we need to reevaluate our schedules because we're too busy. One of the things that made me think about, and I haven't read this, it's in my queue of books to read. And I can't remember the author, but I remember the title because it sticks out. It talks about how the body keeps the score. And if we don't rest, if we don't take time to take a break and to rest, our body's going to let us know. And and it seems like that's part of what happened with you, is that your body let you know in a very rare way, but it certainly let you know. And it's cool to see you finally respond to that call to, I need some time to rest, to not turn my brain off, but to let it rest and doing something like fly fishing. And both Brian and I love fly fishing because of what it allows us to do. Is there's a rhythm to it. There's a beauty to it. The places that you're in are gorgeous, and it allows you to take that deep breath. But there is a movement, and it's still sort of active, so you're not sedentary. And so there's a rhythm to it that is almost like rocking. There's a rocking motion to it that's comforting when you're casting. And so I can certainly see how that was a part of your recovery, and how it was certainly helpful for you to not overcome what happened, but to head it off at the pass before it happened again. So we hope this conversation encourages people and challenges people to, like I said, evaluate their schedule and realize that there are things that we can do to rest, and there are beautiful places that you can do that in. You can find rest, but maybe it's on your porch with a smoker and a piece of brisket on the smoker and sitting back and relaxing as you cook. So I love all of that, and I hope this conversation just encourages people to write their own stories and share their own adventures in the place that we love to call the storied outdoors.
Yeah, I kind of went a different direction when Brian asked me about the Sabbath, because I was thinking, so much more. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we can't, taking a day to not do anything and taking a day to rest from all the things of life and stress is, really how our God created us, and how we're what we should be doing.
Yeah, I like the word Eugene Peterson. He said Sabbath is equal parts prayer and play.
Yeah,
I think we need both of those things. It's not just not doing,
right.
Something. It's remembering who you are, really, and being able to rest in who we are in Christ, so we can relax. We don't have to produce anything or accomplish anything. We're not defined by those things. We're defined by who we are in Christ. And so you can go and not worry about your phone and put a line in the water,
right,
and be fulfilled and be comforted and restful. It's so restful. So, man, what a great picture.
Well, thanks again, Chris.
Yes, thank you for having me on, and really appreciate you inviting me, and glad that I did. I know part of it was trying to connect in your schedule, and part of it was probably most of it was me saying yes, and it had nothing to do with you guys. It's it's the introvert part of me in scheduling, but I'm really glad and glad to meet you guys over video and chatting, and hopefully we'll be able to meet in person sometime and we can
That'd be
fish.
great.
I'd love that.
Man, phenomenal.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please take some time to leave us a review, or better yet, share it with a friend. We hope these stories encourage you to write your own stories and share your own adventures in the storied outdoors.